Amazing who we pops up on our screen. And would you welcome Reverend Julian Harvey from Reflections of Truth? Welcome, Julian. It's been a
Thank you,
while.
Bill.
Thank
It
you.
has been a while.
Yes.
It's nice to be back with Melbourne again. So thank you very much for inviting me to do this morning. I really appreciate it. Those of you that follow Reflections of Truth may recognize the talk title,
Oh,
thinking, oh, he's done this before. What's going on? And it was interesting. So when I don't know how other speakers do it, but I often go quiet and I go within to try and get an idea. And usually what pops into my head is a talk title first that then gives me an idea of what I would like to speak to people about on a Sunday. And when Bill contacted me and said, "Hey, we need a talk title for Sunday. We need it for our mail out." Um, I every time I went into the silence, every time I tried to think about a different or something that I needed to talk about, the title I let go. So now what kept coming up? And what I realized was is that um, when I did this originally in Reflections of Truth, I was going through a fairly major change in my life. It was a big change. For those of you that don't know, I've been a single parent to my son since he was 7. He came back to live with me when he was 7, and he's now literally 2 days ago turned 26. But in October of last year, Sam up stumps and moved to Canada. So he's now living in Toronto and trying to form a life and a pattern of living that he wants in the wonderful cool of Canada. He loves the cold, so he's over there. And what I realized was is that when I gave the talk in Brisbane was is that I had to deal with everything that goes on with change, even though obviously my parenting never stops. As we all know, those of us that have got kids, grown up kids, they can be 30, they can be 40, they can be, whatever age, we never quite stop that parenting process within us, which I think is a spirit-led direction in life that we're given. But the day-to-day functions changed. And I had to look at what had I been doing predominantly based on looking at what Sam's needs were to try and help him get to a point in stage where he was ready to fly the coop and he didn't go just around the corner. He went overseas to Canada, as I said, and there was a lot of processing that I had to go through in that regard. The empty nest syndrome kicked in, and various other bits and pieces. So I was thinking, well, why is this coming up again? Why is I coming up again? Now, my, that all happened in October, November last year. And I dealt through that and I dealt through, or worked through, being, for the first time, not having a Christmas where he was physically with me. We used to have some traditions that we had. Yes, he and I used to sit down and watch Love Actually as a required movie to watch at Christmas time. Um, and it felt very weird thinking about that didn't feel that it was right to do that because he wasn't with me. So there's this whole changing what I do at Christmas time. So I had to sort of deal with all of that. And so when I was thinking about, well, what can I talk to Melbourne about? I suddenly realized um, that I was also in the middle of another major change, which is also based on Sam moving overseas. As you all know, the world of being a renter in Australia has gone through a huge change in the last 12 months, where rents have gone skyrocketed through the roof, and property prices have gone through the roof as well. And all those people who are sensibly investing in properties are selling them and buying new ones and doing all sorts of things. And I don't have an issue with that. That's wonderful for them. However, my property that I was living in, the owners decided they wanted to sell. Um, and so they asked me to move out, which was fine. Didn't have a problem with that. that's their prerogative, and that was okay. But what was really interesting was is that every time I went into that quiet time to go, okay, give me some guidance on where I have to go and what I have to do, and give me some understanding of where I'm at with what's going on. The constant message I kept getting was the place that you need to live in is not ready yet. It's not there. And it's not going to be there for a while. And so I thought to myself, well, that's fine. So I started looking around at, healthy parks and park benches I could live on, and I looked at bridges I could live under, and I looked at, I have a very nice car, a very lovely car, and I was looking at, well, okay, a mattress on the back of that, and I was looking at that, and then the universe went, yeah, no, that's not quite what we had in mind. And I have a half a stepsister from my dad's marriage, not Grace's daughter, but my sister. I very much call her my sister. I met Zoe when she was 5 years of age, and she's now into her 50s. So we've had a long, long, loving history as brother and sister together, and I adore her. Um, but suddenly, out of the blue, I rang my sister and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" She said, "Yeah, not so good." I said, "Okay, what's going on?" We talked about a few things, and she said, "You know what? I need a one-on-one lunch with my brother." I said, "Not a problem. Can sort that out." So we met up on a Sunday afternoon after church at Unity, and I went up to sort of a place near hers, and we're talking about things, and we're talking about what's going on in her life, and talking about what's going on in my life. And I sort of said, I'm about to be homeless, and she said, well, um, my father-in-law's place is sitting up there in Brighton, which is on the north side of Brisbane, and I currently lived on the south side of Brisbane and work on the south side of Brisbane. She said his house is sitting up there completely vacant. John passed away just before Christmas, and I actually was asked to do the funeral, so I conducted the funeral service for them. And she said, "I'll ask and see if it's okay for you to live there, because there's the usual family stuff about what's happening with the house, conversations that happen between siblings." And the house is quite rightly not in any shape or sort of state where it could be sold. There's a lot of stuff around that John's collected. He's lived here for 43 years, and he's lived here predominantly on his own for the last 30 odd years, 20 odd, 30 odd years on his own. So he's not a hoarder, but he's also not a thrower. So there's lots of stuff around, which is kind of interesting to go through and help out with. And Zoe said, well, I could ask Brandon and the family if it's okay if you bunk there for a while. And I said, yeah, and I'll help. If there's things that need to be done around the house, I'll help. If there's things that need packing up, and, I'm more than happy to help. And when I did that, Spirit went, yep, that's exactly what you need to do. You need to put all your stuff in storage for the moment. So I've whacked it into a storage shed. And I've moved up to Brighton. Now, one of the interesting things about that is that um, it then brought up, when I started looking at what to present for you guys, it brought up a lot of the same sort of stuff. So um, I know that a lot of you are, avid readers. I don't know whether any of you have ever read Robert Brummett's book, Finding Yourself in Transition, which is a marvelous book. If you're going through any form of transition, or a transition's coming up that you want to work through, it is a really good book to get hold of to help you going through that process. And Brummett talks about the metaphysical aspects of the uh, the people of Israel and their journey from Egypt to the Promised Land, which many of us would hopefully know the story of that. And it's about he utilizes the story from a metaphysical aspect of that journey, of what we have to go through to get into the promised land, or into where we feel we're rightly directed to land. Now, obviously, there are a whole bunch of events that happen throughout that story that are really important to understand from a metaphysical point of view, but also we need to understand it is a methodology of teaching metaphysical lessons using a fairly dramatic. So there's some fairly dramatic things that happen throughout the nature of that storytelling. But we can relate it to any circumstance or any situation, or even a belief or pattern or condition that we want to transition through or from. So it's understanding that we can use these stories to help us through that process. One of the things that Brummett talks about in that respect is that we learn from the story that it's a transforming power that we have to go through. We have to go through a period or a process of transition. And it's not necessarily about the arrival, it's not about the destination, but it's about how do we grow physically, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally by going through that process itself. There's an old adage that a lot of people say that if we repeat the same thing but expect a different result, we're probably living on the borderline of insanity. And if you well, I know for me personally, I've looked at patterns of behavior over my years on this earthly plane. I've seen patterns of behavior where I've repeated the same thing. Looks a little bit different, slightly twisted, you know, different players, different circumstances. But the underlying cause, the underlying issue, the underlying belief is pretty much the same. So in my current circumstances, where I am house sitting, appropriately in my brother-in-law's father's house. Um, what I've been able to witness, or what I've been able to understand, is how I deal with change, how I deal with the process of transition, and how my family members who are not on the same path that I am and may or may not have the same understanding that I have about change. Now, my sister is a doctor of psychology, and she uses the psychological understandings and the theoretical understandings of how to deal with change. But my brother-in-law is very much caught up in the emotion and the physicality, which is perfectly understandable, and I love him going through it and love watching him go through it. But he's very much grounded in the human or I like the word the Adam mind, that mind of the human consciousness on how to deal with looking at his dad's stuff, and making a decision as to how important is it. And then obviously, do we throw it out? Do we keep it? What do we do with it? And so watching the way I'm dealing with the fact that let me put it this way. I could go down the pathway of, "Oh, I'm homeless. I've got nowhere to live, and do a whole beat up of myself on how did I get to being, 63 years of age and be homeless and yada, yada, yada. I could go down that path if I wanted to. Or I could take the attitude of, no, this is actually a function and a part of the transition process that we teach at Unity, which we call the creation process. So when we look at it from that perspective, we use metaphysically, we use the first chapter and the first book of the Bible, which of course is Genesis. And if we understand how we create from divine mind, divine consciousness, I don't know if any of you have sat in recently on Paul Hasselbeck classes, or if you've sat in on any of my metaphysics classes. But Paul calls divine mind the infinite field of potential and possibility, which I really love. I understand divine mind. I understand that there is a spiritual consciousness that is always available. It's in, through, and as me. But if I use those words for some reason, it then opens my mind up to that there is this infinite field always available that I can draw down from to create what I need to create or what needs to be developed. So in Genesis, obviously, the creation process starts. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, which is Genesis 1, 2. And I'm not going to read the whole thing in Genesis. I'm sure you've all heard it or you all know it sort of overall. But day one is light, which is awareness. Day two is the sky. They create the sky. The sky is created. And that is about faith. That's about understanding that there is this infinite field of potential and possibility all around us, that we have the oneness within us. Then day three is about the land. It's about the plants. So it's about growth. It's about sustenance. It's about acknowledging that there are things happening around us that we can draw on to help us through the process. Day four is the creation of the sun and the moon, understanding that there are times when we have enlightenment and times where we need to reflect on the lightness that's been given to us, to the understanding of moving through that process of understanding how we flow through a change. Day five is where the waters are created. So the land is separated and the waters is created, and the sea creatures. And the sea creatures are those subconscious thoughts, those subconscious feelings. We know there's something there, but we don't know what it is, and we don't know how it works. Day six is where the animals and humans, this is where the ideas, and of course, with the waters in the land, they also have the birds of the air, which are our higher thoughts, our higher consciousness coming into play. So we have the sea creatures and we have the higher consciousness of the birds and the higher understanding that there is something there that we need to work with, something that we need to um, build from. And it's where we bring the infinite into the finite. It's where we bring the unformed into the formed. And that's where the animals and humans, it's bringing it into our consciousness and allowing that consciousness to unfurl the steps, the processes of what we need to do. It's the seventh day that gets me. I understand all of that and I can do all of that. I can write journals about it. I can pray about it. I can go into the silence about it. I can allow the infilling of understanding um, in relation to what I need to do. It's the seventh day, which is the day of rest. And the day of rest for me is the challenging one because I'm a doer. Those of you that know me and those of you that have worked alongside me is somebody gives me an idea or I have a concept or I do something, I get in there and I just do it. Sometimes to the detriment of my own stuff, but I get in there and I do it. And so with the fundamentals of, and there's a great quote in Paul Hasselbeck's book, Heart-Centered Metaphysics, which I teach a lot from. And he quotes from Charles Fillmore's Christian Healing. And the quote goes as such, and it's quite a long one, so hang in there with me. The truth is then that God is principle, law, being, mind, spirit, all good, omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, unchangeable, creator, father, cause, and source of all that is. That God is individually formed in consciousness in each of us and is known as Father when we recognize God within us as our creator and our mind as our life, as our very being. So that to bring in, it goes further on to say that to bring forth or to manifest the harmony of divine mind or the kingdom of heaven, as we call it, all our ideas must be one with divine ideas and must be expressed in the divine order of divine mind. So again, coming back to our metaphysical understanding of the creation process, that is a form or one avenue that divine order works in, through, and as us. It gives us the awareness. We have the faith that it is producing for us. We have the sustenance to know that we have the ability to do what we need to do, and we have the ideas from the unconscious, from the human consciousness, and also from the unconsciousness, and from the infinite field of potential and possibility, and then we bring that into manifestation. But again, as I said, it's that seventh day, the rest day, that for me causes the most issue. Now, going back to Robert Brummett, he talks about the Exodus story and about the tribe of Israel wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, which metaphysically means that a process will take an unknown, indeterminate time to unfurl. And that's what I found with what's going on with me in my current situation is it's taking its time to do what it needs to do. Now, again, as I said, I'm a doer, and what the universe has done is it's given me an opportunity to take time out to help somebody else through their process of change in getting rid of his father's stuff and moving through his house and cleaning up and looking after the house on their behalf is what divine mind wants me to do, because the property that I need to move into isn't ready yet. So for me, it's really important to understand that I need to take that rest. I need to understand that this is here for a reason, and not try to force the timing of any change that will create a false positive outcome, as Robert Brummett says. He gives a great example of a man who is often divorcing one person and remarrying somebody different, but the relationship stays the same. The definition of insanity: repeating the same thing and expecting a different result. So how do we go through the change, and how do we get to that process where we are relaxed and we are in tune with the ability to have day 7, where we have to wait for that transition to to develop the way it needs to develop through the process of unity. So a new beginning or a new start with anything requires the internal work, and obviously the way we do that internal work will help us eventuate it into the external. Robert Brummett talks about that through mindful observation, we can make new choices that lead to transformation. So it's again, one of the things that I think is very important in unity is awareness, being aware of what's going on in, through, and as you, as well as what's going through on around you. And as Jesus taught, each transformation is a death and a rebirth into a new life. And it may take your faith to do this, and it may take faith for all of us to do this. So what I recommend is that you take time for self-reflection. If you're going through any major change, or even if you're going through a minor change, it doesn't have to be a big change, but if something triggers in you, oh, this is a change I need to think about, then take some time for self-reflections. Ask yourself some questions, whatever those questions might be. When I was talking about my son moving out, and when I was going through that, the sorts of questions I were coming up were, how do I want to feel in my new beginning? How do I want to be in my new beginning? And I've done the same thing with looking for a house. How do I want to feel in my new environment? What do I want to experience more of? What sort of stuff am I looking for when I move into my new environment? I'll give you a hint. I want more joy. I want more love. And I want more of abundance of things that invigorate me, not just abundance in cash or, finances. It's more about me having more of the good in my life. But I have to be very careful about not investing in a specific solution. So I need to allow the process of the infinite field of potential to do its job, because that's its job, is to provide me with ideas, with concepts, understanding. So obviously we have many, many tools that we use at Unity. Affirmative prayer, affirming that I am in the right place at the right time doing the right thing, and that the right event, the right circumstance is here with me now. Spending time in meditation. I've moved house. I'm in a very different environment. One of the interesting things is that where I was living before was constantly being disturbed by, I lived next to a major freeway in Brisbane, and there were, police, ambulance, fire, hot rods in their hot little hot four motor cars with backfire exhausts, and Harley Davidsons driving by at all times of day and night. Friday nights and Saturday nights were not a quiet night for me at home because of the noise. Where I'm living now is on the north side of Brisbane, and it's beautifully quiet, and it's also beautifully dark. Where I lived before was lots of street lights. Now I have beautiful dark and I can sleep. I get a good night's sleep. So meditation for me in my old place was a bit of a challenge. I had to pick my time specifically, whereas here I can meditate at any given time. I meditated this morning before the service. Um, Being also hyper vigilant about any feelings that you might be going through, acknowledge those feelings, have those feelings, and make sure that you understand what those feelings are doing, and where they're coming from. But also be aware of your body talking to you. What's going on within your body when you're going through change? So change, as we all know, is a constant. It's not a bad thing, but how there's a famous saying, life is not about what happens to you, it's about how you deal with what happens to you. And in Unity, we are blessed by the ability to be able to have tools and be able to have ways of dealing with change, no matter what that change is, whether it's sudden or whether it's gradual, we have these tools. Our goal is to remember we have those tools. So I encourage you to look at change from a positive point of view of, hey, I get to experience the divine in more realistic ways here and now, every day, as I move through that change. So I've let go, and now what? Now I get to experience what's next. And that's the exciting part of change. Thank you for letting me talk. Thank you, Bill.
Wow. Great food for thought. Thank you, Julian. That was just what we wanted to hear. We would have a nice song after this, but I know that you're anxious to get started with your reflections of truth. Is that right?
That's right. I've now got to go and I've got to go and be rad for Reflections of
All
Truth.
right.
I've got to run the slideshow and get it all up and running and stuff. So
All right. Well,
thanks,
we'll
guys. I
all
really
say
appreciate
goodbye
you.
to you, and we wish you well for the next hour, and we hope we see you again, regardless of daylight savings. I think you're coming down live very soon, so
Yeah, I believe so. I'll be down for work. I'll be down there, and I believe I'll be staying over the weekend. So I may be
great.
able to catch up with you. We'll see how we go.
Very good.
All
Okay.
right.
Well, thank
Lovely
you,
to see you
and
guys. I
all the
really
best for
appreciate it.
today. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Blessings.